Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into something that might surprise you. The romantic entanglements, courtship rituals, and dating customs of ancient Rome. Now before you picture togas and wine-soaked poetry readings, let me tell you, Roman romance was far more complicated, strategic, and frankly bizarre than anything Hollywood has ever shown you. So grab your favorite pillow, dim those lights, and let's settle in for a journey back to a time when finding love involved political alliances, family negotiations, and occasionally a bit of kidnapping. And hey, if you're new here, welcome to the channel where we explore history's forgotten corners at a pace that won't keep you awake all night. If you enjoy these deep dives into the past, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, but only if you genuinely find this stuff as fascinating as I do. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united by curiosity about how people lived and loved 2,000 years ago. Now picture this. You're a young Roman in the 1st century CE, and you've just come of age. Your heart is full of romantic dreams, and you're ready to find your soulmate. Except, well, that concept doesn't really exist yet. What you're really ready for is a carefully orchestrated social transaction that will hopefully produce legitimate heirs, strengthen family alliances, and maybe, if you're incredibly lucky, involve someone you can tolerate sharing a household with for the next few decades. Roman dating, if we can even call it that, was nothing like the modern world of swiping left and right or meeting cute at coffee shops. It was a complex web of social expectations, legal requirements, and family politics that would make even the most dramatic reality TV show look tame by comparison. Let's start with the basics. In ancient Rome, marriage wasn't about personal fulfillment or romantic love, though those could certainly develop over time. It was fundamentally about creating legitimate children who could inherit property, form political alliances, and continue family bloodlines. Love was considered a pleasant bonus, not a requirement. The Latin word for the kind of passionate love we idealize today, amor, was often viewed with suspicion. Too much amor could cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions that might harm the family's interests. Instead, Romans valued concordia, harmony between spouses, and pietas, duty and respect within family relationships. These weren't exactly the stuff of sonnets, but they formed the bedrock of Roman society. A good marriage was one that functioned smoothly, produced children, and enhanced both families' social standing. The process of finding a spouse began early and involved far more people than just the potential couple. Roman children, particularly from wealthy families, were often betrothed while still very young, sometimes as early as age 7 or 8, though the actual marriage wouldn't be consummated until much later. These early betrothals served as a kind of social contract, binding families together and ensuring advantageous matches. For Roman girls, marriage typically happened around age 14 to 16, while boys usually waited until their late teens or early 20s. This age gap wasn't accidental. It reflected Roman beliefs about maturity, fertility, and the different roles men and women would play in marriage. The girl was expected to be young enough to be molded into the ideal Roman wife, while the man needed time to establish himself in his career and prove his worthiness as a husband and father. But here's where things get interesting. Before any formal courtship could begin, there was an entire investigative process that would put modern background checks to shame. Roman families didn't just consider whether two young people might be compatible. They examined bloodlines, financial status, political connections, moral character, and even physical attributes that might affect fertility and the health of future children. Wealthy Roman families often employed marriage brokers, professional matchmakers, who specialized in navigating the complex social hierarchies and finding suitable matches. These weren't the gentle, intuitive matchmakers of fairy tales. They were shrewd business people who understood that a well-arranged marriage could elevate a family's status for generations, while a poor match could lead to social and financial ruin. The marriage broker would compile detailed dossiers on eligible young people, including information about their family's wealth, their ancestors' achievements, any scannage, and their personal character traits. They would arrange dulls or legal troubles in their line meetings between families, negotiate dowries, and help draft the complex legal agreements that governed Roman marriages. Once a potential match was identified, the real courtship process could begin. But don't imagine romantic walks in moonlit gardens or intimate conversations over candlelit dinners. Roman courtship was a highly supervised, ritualized affair that took place almost entirely in public spaces and involved multiple family members at every stage. The young man, assuming his family approved of the match, would formally request permission to visit the girl's family home. These visits followed strict protocols. He would arrive accompanied by male relatives or trusted friends, never alone. The girl would be present, but often accompanied by her mother, aunts, or other female family members. Conversations were formal and focused on demonstrating the young man's education, moral character, and prospects for success. These courtship visits weren't really about the couple getting to know each other as individuals. They were elaborate performances designed to showcase family values, social status, and cultural refinement. The young man might recite poetry, not necessarily to woo his potential bride, but to demonstrate his education and cultural sophistication. The girl might play music or display her skill in weaving, showing that she possessed the domestic talents expected of a Roman wife. Gift-giving played a crucial role in Roman courtship, but even this was heavily regulated by social expectations. The most traditional and significant gift was the betrothal ring, usually made of iron rather than gold, symbolizing the strength and permanence of the commitment being made. But suitors also gave carefully chosen presents that demonstrated their wealth, taste, and understanding of proper social behavior. Popular courtship gifts included jewelry, particularly bracelets and necklaces, fine fabrics and clothing, books of poetry, small sculptures or decorative objects for the home, and exotic foods or spices that showed the man's ability to provide luxury for his future family. However, gifts that were too expensive or personal could be seen as inappropriate, suggesting either that the man was trying to buy affection rather than earn it, or that he didn't understand proper social boundaries. The girl's response to these gifts was itself a form of communication. Accepting a gift graciously indicated interest in the match, while politely declining or returning gifts sent a clear message that the courtship wasn't welcome. Families paid close attention to these subtle signals, as they helped determine whether to continue pursuing the match or look elsewhere. Throughout this process, the actual feelings of the young people involved were considered, but they weren't the primary factor in decision-making. A girl who strongly objected to a proposed match might be heard, especially if she had good reasons related to the man's character or reputation. But romantic attraction, or the lack thereof, wasn't typically considered sufficient grounds to reject an otherwise advantageous arrangement. The courtship period also served as an extended evaluation process. Families observed how the potential couple interacted, whether they showed appropriate respect for each other and for family members, and whether they seemed likely to create a harmonious household together. This wasn't about sparks flying or instant chemistry. It was about compatibility in a much more practical sense. Roman society also had to navigate the complex issue of social class in romantic relationships. Marriage between citizens of different social ranks was possible but complicated. A wealthy plebeian family might arrange a marriage with a less wealthy but more prestigious patrician family, with each side bringing different advantages to the union. However, marriages between citizens and non-citizens, particularly slaves, were prohibited by law and could result in severe legal consequences. The most elite Roman families faced additional complications in their courtship processes. Their marriages had political implications that extended far beyond personal happiness or even family advancement. A senator's daughter marrying into a rival political faction could shift the balance of power in the forum. A consul's son choosing a bride from a family with military connections might signal new alliances or brewing conflicts. These marriages were watched closely by political observers, analysed by historians, and sometimes even influenced by imperial decree. This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of Roman courtship, the role of public spectacle and social performance. Romans didn't date in private. Their romantic lives unfolded in full view of their communities, at religious festivals, public baths, theatrical performances, and elaborate dinner parties. Young people of marriageable age were expected to be seen, evaluated, and discussed by the broader social circle. The most important venues for these public courtships were religious festivals and ceremonies. During events like the Festival of Venus, goddess of love and fertility, or the celebrations honoring Juno, protector of marriage, eligible young Romans would dress in their finest clothing and parade through the streets with their families. These weren't casual strolls. They were carefully choreographed displays designed to attract attention and demonstrate social status. At these events, potential suitors might catch glimpses of young women they'd heard about through family networks. A well-timed appearance at the theatre, where families sat in designated sections based on social rank, could spark conversations that led to formal introductions. The public baths, segregated by gender, but with common areas where families could meet, became informal marriage markets where parents sized up potential matches for their children. Roman dinner parties, or convivia, served as perhaps the most important courtship venues for the upper classes. These elaborate affairs could last for hours and included multiple courses, entertainment, and carefully planned guest lists. A host might invite several families with marriageable children, creating opportunities for supervised interactions in a controlled environment. During these gatherings, young men could demonstrate their wit and education through conversation, while young women could display their grace, intelligence, and domestic skills. The seating arrangements, the quality of the food, and even the entertainment choices all sent messages about family status and values. A family that served exotic delicacies from distant provinces showed their wealth and connections. Entertainment that featured refined poetry or sophisticated musical performances indicated cultural sophistication. But Roman courtship wasn't limited to the elite. Middle-class families, tradespeople, and even freed slaves developed their own courtship customs, often simpler but no less meaningful than those of the aristocracy. A blacksmith's son might court a baker's daughter by demonstrating his skill at the forge, creating beautiful metalwork as gifts. A merchant's family might arrange meetings at the forum during business hours, allowing young people to see each other's work ethic and commercial acumen. These middle-class courtships often had more room for personal preference and genuine affection, partly because the political and social stakes were lower. While a senator's marriage might influence imperial policy, a shopkeeper's marriage affected mainly the immediate families involved. This gave ordinary Romans slightly more freedom to consider compatibility and mutual attraction in their romantic decisions. The role of enslaved people in Roman courtship presents a complex and often troubling picture. Slaves couldn't legally marry, but they could form relationships called contubernum, unofficial unions recognized within slave communities. These relationships had no legal protection and could be dissolved at an owner's whim, making them both precious and precarious. Wealthy Romans sometimes allowed favorite slaves to form these unions, viewing stable relationships as good for morale and productivity. Some owners even provided modest wedding ceremonies for enslaved couples, though these had no legal standing. The children of these unions remained slaves, belonging to the mother's owner according to Roman law. More disturbing was the practice of using attractive slaves as courtship tools. Wealthy families might display beautiful enslaved young people at social gatherings, not as potential spouses, but as demonstrations of their wealth and refined taste. These slaves might be trained in music, poetry, or dance to provide entertainment during courtship visits, serving as living accessories to enhance the family's social status. The transition from courtship to formal betrothal involved elaborate legal and religious ceremonies that could take months to complete. The betrothal itself, called sponsalia, was a legally binding contract that required formal dissolution if either party wished to withdraw. This wasn't a casual promise, it was a serious legal commitment that affected property rights, inheritance laws, and social standing. The betrothal ceremony typically began with the exchange of rings and formal vows witnessed by family members and friends. The couple would clasp hands in a gesture called dextrarum unctio, symbolizing their union and the joining of their families. Religious offerings were made to household gods and protective deities, seeking divine blessing for the upcoming marriage. Once betrothed, the couple entered a liminal period that could last anywhere from a few months to several years. During this time, they were neither single nor married, existing in a carefully regulated state that had its own rules and expectations. The betrothed couple might exchange letters, always read by family members, and meet regularly under strict supervision. This period served multiple purposes. It allowed families to finalize complex financial arrangements, including the negotiation of dowries and the transfer of property. It gave the couple time to become acquainted within appropriate social boundaries, and it provided an opportunity for either family to withdraw gracefully if problems arose or better opportunities presented themselves. The dowry negotiations during betrothal could be incredibly complex, involving not just money, but land, slaves, household goods, and even business partnerships. Roman law required that the dowry remain the wife's property throughout the marriage, though the husband controlled its use. If the marriage ended in divorce or the husband's death, the dowry had to be returned to the wife or her family, making these negotiations crucial for women's long-term financial security. Young Romans navigating this system learned to read subtle social cues and navigate complex family dynamics. A raised eyebrow from a potential mother-in-law, the quality of wine served at a courtship dinner, or the seating arrangement at a public event all carried meaning. Success required not just personal charm, but political awareness, social intelligence, and the ability to represent one's family with honor. The pressure on young people, especially women, was enormous. A girl who failed to attract a suitable husband brought shame to her family and faced a lifetime of dependency and social marginalization. A young man who couldn't secure an advantageous marriage might find his political and business prospects permanently damaged. Yet within these rigid constraints, genuine affection and even passionate love could develop. Roman literature is full of stories about couples who found deep happiness within arranged marriages, learning to appreciate each other's character and building partnerships that lasted decades. The poet Pliny the Younger wrote touchingly about his devotion to his wife Calpurnia, describing their intellectual companionship and emotional intimacy in terms that sound remarkably modern. The emotional landscape of Roman romance was far more nuanced than our modern stereotypes suggest. While marriages were arranged, the Romans weren't emotionless robots going through the motions. They understood the difference between different types of love and had specific words for each. Amor was passionate, often dangerous love that could consume reason. Caritas represented deep affection and care between family members. And then there was the kind of love they most valued in marriage, a steady, respectful partnership that grew stronger over time. Roman poets and philosophers spent considerable time analyzing these different forms of love. Ovid, in his scandalous guide Ars Amatoria, or The Art of Love, provided detailed instructions on how to seduce and maintain romantic relationships, though his advice was considered so subversive that Emperor Augustus eventually exiled him. Ovid wrote about the thrill of forbidden attraction, the strategies for winning over a reluctant lover, and the importance of maintaining mystery and challenge in romantic relationships. But Ovid's approach represented the exception, not the rule. Most Romans viewed his kind of passionate pursuit as entertaining in poetry, but dangerous in real life. The ideal Roman marriage was built on mutual respect, shared values, and complementary roles, rather than overwhelming passion. Husbands and wives were expected to be partners in managing households, raising children, and advancing family interests. This doesn't mean Roman marriages were loveless business arrangements. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii reveals touching personal details about married couples. Wedding rings inscribed with messages like, "May you live sweetly," and household shrines decorated with images of couples holding hands suggest that affection and tenderness were very much part of Roman married life, even when those marriages began as practical arrangements. The daily reality of Roman courtship involved countless small rituals that reinforced social hierarchies while allowing for personal connection. When a young man visited his potential bride's home, every detail was carefully orchestrated. The girl's mother might serve specific foods that demonstrated the family's wealth and cultural sophistication. Honey cakes showed they could afford expensive imported ingredients. Wine from particular regions indicated trade connections and refined taste. The conversation during these visits followed predictable patterns but still allowed for genuine personality to emerge. The young man might be asked to recite passages from Virgil or Homer, demonstrating his education, but his choice of passages and his delivery style revealed his personal preferences and character. A girl might be asked to play the lyre or sing, showing her musical training, but her song selection and emotional expression provided glimpses of her inner life. These courtship visits were also opportunities for families to assess practical compatibility. Did the young man show proper respect to the girl's father and male relatives? Did he demonstrate the kind of authority and confidence expected of a Roman paterfamilias? Did the girl display the modesty, intelligence, and domestic skills that would make her a suitable wife and mother? Was she too bold or too timid? These weren't abstract questions. They had real implications for how successfully the couple would navigate married life. Roman society also developed elaborate codes around physical contact during courtship. Unmarried couples were never left alone together, but supervised interactions allowed for carefully regulated intimacy. Holding hands during betrothal ceremonies was highly significant, as was the ritual of the man placing a ring on the woman's finger. These moments of physical connection were charged with meaning precisely because they were so rare and formal. The concept of romantic letters existed in Roman culture, but they were nothing like private modern correspondence. Letters between betrothed couples were typically read aloud to family members, making them public performances rather than intimate communications. Young men learned to write in elevated, poetic language that would impress not just their intended bride, but her entire family. These letters often included quotes from classical literature, philosophical reflections, and carefully crafted compliments that demonstrated both education and proper moral values. Gift-giving during Roman courtship followed strict social protocols that revealed deep cultural values. Jewelry was popular, but had to be chosen carefully. A bracelet was considered more appropriate than a necklace, which was seen as too intimate for unmarried couples. Books of poetry were excellent gifts because they showed intellectual sophistication, but the choice of poet mattered enormously. Virgil was always safe. Ovid was risky. Catullus, with his passionate and sometimes explicit love poems, was absolutely scandalous. Perfumes and cosmetics were common courtship gifts, but they carried complex social messages. Expensive imported scents from Arabia or India demonstrated wealth and exotic connections. However, too much emphasis on physical beauty could suggest that the suitor was more interested in superficial attraction than in the woman's character and family background. The ideal gift struck a balance between showing generosity and respect without appearing frivolous or inappropriate. Food gifts were particularly meaningful in Roman culture. A suitor might bring exotic fruits, expensive honey, or rare spices to demonstrate his ability to provide luxury for his future household. But he might also bring simpler gifts like fresh bread or wine from his family's estate, showing his connection to the land and traditional Roman values. The girl's family would reciprocate with carefully prepared meals that showcase their own domestic skills and hospitality. The religious dimension of Roman courtship was deeply intertwined with daily life. Before any major courtship decision, families consulted household gods, made offerings at temples, and sought signs from the divine. The god Hymenaeus was specifically invoked for successful marriages, while Venus was petitioned for love and fertility. Juno, as the protector of married women, received elaborate offerings from families hoping to arrange advantageous matches. Religious festivals provided some of the few opportunities for young Romans to see potential partners in less formal settings. During the festival of Flora in late April, young people wore flower crowns and participated in processions through the city. The atmosphere was more relaxed than usual, allowing for brief conversations and meaningful glances that might not be possible in more structured social situations. The Lupercalia festival in February was particularly significant for romantic connections, though in ways that might shock modern sensibilities. Young men would run through the streets striking women with strips of goat hide, a ritual believed to promote fertility. Women would position themselves to be struck, seeing it as a blessing for future childbearing. While this sounds bizarre and violent to modern ears, for Romans it was a sacred ritual that connected romantic relationships to cosmic forces and divine will. Seasonal timing played a crucial role in Roman courtship and marriage planning. June was considered the most auspicious month for weddings because it was sacred to Juno. But this meant that serious courtship needed to begin months earlier. Families planning summer weddings would start their matchmaking efforts in the winter, allowing time for proper introductions, negotiations, and preparations. The months of May and February were considered unlucky for marriages, so courtships that began during these periods faced additional challenges. Young couples might have to wait months for an appropriate time to marry, during which their betrothal could face scrutiny, gossip, and potential interference from rival suitors or disapproving relatives. Weather and agricultural cycles also influenced courtship patterns. Wealthy families often spent summers at country estates, providing opportunities for extended visits and more relaxed interactions between potential couples. Harvest festivals brought together families from wide geographic areas, creating marriage markets where parents could evaluate potential matches for their children. The role of extended family in Roman courtship was far more significant than in modern relationships. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, and even family friends had recognized authority to offer opinions about potential matches. A girl's grandmother might have veto power over a proposed marriage based on her assessment of the suitor's character or family reputation. An uncle who had served in the military might evaluate a young man's potential for leadership and courage. This extended family involvement wasn't just meddling. In a society without formal credit ratings or background check services, family networks served as crucial sources of information about potential partners. A cousin who had served in the same legion as a suitor could provide insights about his behavior under pressure. A sister who had married into a particular family could warn about their financial problems or character flaws. Roman courtship also had to navigate the complex realities of life expectancy and mortality. With high rates of death in childbirth and from disease, many Romans faced the prospect of multiple marriages throughout their lives. Widows and widowers with children from previous marriages created complicated family dynamics that affected courtship strategies. A widow with substantial property from her deceased husband might be an attractive marriage prospect, but her children's inheritance rights had to be carefully negotiated. A widower seeking a new wife might need to find someone willing to serve as stepmother to existing children while also producing new heirs. These practical considerations often trumped romantic attraction in second and subsequent marriages. The legal framework surrounding Roman marriage was incredibly complex and affected every aspect of courtship. The concept of patria potestas meant that fathers had absolute authority over their children's marriage choices, at least in theory. A father could arrange his daughter's marriage without her consent, dissolve an engagement against her wishes, or even force her to divorce a husband she loved. However, the reality was often more nuanced. Roman society valued harmony and stability. So fathers who completely ignored their children's preferences risked creating household discord that could damage the family's reputation. Smart Roman parents learned to guide their children towards suitable choices, while allowing them to feel some agency in the process. The distinction between different types of Roman marriage also affected courtship strategies. Marriage cum manu transferred the wife completely to her husband's legal authority, while marriage sine manu allowed her to remain under her father's control. These weren't. They had real implications for property nicalities, to just legal tech rights, inheritance, and the woman's status within her new household. Couples and their families had to negotiate not just whether to marry, but what kind of marriage to create. A woman from a wealthy family might insist on marriage sine manu to protect her inheritance rights. A man from a politically ambitious family might prefer marriage cum manu to ensure his wife's complete loyalty to his interests, rather than her birth family's. The negotiation process around these marriage types could take months and involved not just the immediate families, but also legal advisors, property assessors, and sometimes even government officials. Imagine trying to plan a romantic future while lawyers argued over which version of marriage contract would best protect everyone's financial interests. It wasn't exactly the stuff of love songs. Roman courtship also had to contend with the realities of urban life in a crowded, bustling city. Unlike the pastoral settings we might imagine from romantic poetry, most Roman courtship took place in the noisy, smelly, chaotic environment of ancient Rome itself. The streets were crowded with merchants hawking their wares, slaves carrying water and goods, and the constant rumble of cartwheels on stone. Young couples meeting at public venues had to conduct their carefully supervised conversations while surrounded by the sounds and smells of daily life. The romantic stroll through a garden was more likely a walk through the forum, dodging horse manure and listening to political speeches. Even the wealthy couldn't escape entirely from urban realities, though their private gardens and spacious homes provided some refuge from the chaos. The concept of privacy as we understand it simply didn't exist for most Romans. Houses were designed around central courtyards, where multiple generations of family members lived, worked, and socialized together. A young woman receiving a suitor might have a dozen relatives within earshot, all of whom felt entitled to observe and comment on the interaction. Servants moved constantly through the household, making truly private conversation nearly impossible. This lack of privacy actually served important social functions in Roman courtship. It prevented accusations of impropriety that could damage reputations and ruin marriage prospects. It ensured that courtship conversations remained focused on appropriate topics rather than becoming too personal or intimate. And it allowed families to gather information about potential matches through direct observation rather than relying solely on reputation and hearsay. Roman literature provides fascinating glimpses into how young people actually felt about these elaborate courtship rituals. Letters and poems reveal that many Romans experienced genuine romantic feelings, even within the constraints of arranged marriages. They wrote about the excitement of catching glimpses of their intended at public events, the nervousness of formal courtship visits, and the gradual development of affection through supervised interactions. Some young Romans became quite creative in finding ways to communicate personal feelings within the rigid social structure. They might choose particular passages of poetry to recite that carried hidden meanings. They could express preferences through gift choices or seating arrangements at family dinners. A young woman might wear specific colors or jewelry that sent subtle signals about her interest in a particular suitor. The role of female relatives in Roman courtship was particularly complex and important. While fathers and male family members made the official decisions, mothers, aunts, and grandmothers often wielded significant behind-the-scenes influence. These women had networks of information about eligible young men, their families, and their reputations. They could make or break a potential match through their assessments and recommendations. Older women also served as crucial mentors for young girls navigating the courtship process. They taught them how to dress, speak, and behave during courtship visits. They provided advice about managing the emotional challenges of meeting potential husbands chosen by their families. And they offered practical wisdom about marriage, childbearing, and household management that would be essential for success in married life. The economic dimensions of Roman courtship extended far beyond simple dowry negotiations. Families had to consider the long-term financial implications of marriage alliances, including inheritance patterns, business partnerships, and even tax obligations. A marriage between two merchant families might create valuable trade connections. A union between a military family and a political family could open doors to lucrative government contracts. These economic calculations weren't cynical or cold-hearted by Roman standards. Romans viewed marriage as fundamentally about creating stable households that could support children, care for aging parents, and contribute to the broader community. Love and personal happiness were wonderful if they developed, but they weren't considered essential for a successful marriage in the way that financial stability and social compatibility were. And there we have it, the intricate world of Roman romance, where love was less about butterflies in your stomach and more about contracts in your father's study. From marriage brokers compiling dossiers like ancient private investigators, to young couples stealing meaningful glances across crowded dinner parties, Roman courtship was a fascinating blend of strategy, tradition, and surprisingly genuine human connection. So the next time someone complains about modern dating apps, just remind them that at least they don't need their grandmother's approval and a lawyer present for every conversation. Sweet dreams, and thanks for joining me on this journey through history's most bureaucratic love stories.